Rumors suggest Frederic Vasseur may depart for Ferrari following the disappointing 2025 season, with the SF25 currently trailing McLaren by 197 points in the constructors' standings. And this would completely change the internal scenario in Formula 1, especially for the new 2026 regulations next year. In today's video, we're going to discuss the press conference that took place in Canada. We're going to look at the words of Leclerc, Hamilton, and we're also going to listen to what Verstappen had to say. Before we start, please leave a supportive like. It's crucial to support my videos. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Now, let's get started. I have to be honest, I'm not surprised by Leclerc's words in which he staunchly defends Vasseur and his work. And he also said that they want him in the team for the future. It's normal. He's the team principal of Ferrari at this moment. Ferrari internally needs cohesion to face this crisis moment, especially after the start of the championship that did not go well according to expectations. So it's normal that Leclerc and Hamilton join together to defend Vasseur, who to date has not shown what he too was hoping for. Obviously, after the negative results of the start of the season, however, be careful, we have to consider one thing. Sure, he hired Loic Serra, he hired Jerome D'Ambrosio, who are two people we hoped could do something more for Ferrari. However, in my opinion, the real year in which we will have to judge Vasseur will be 2026. And there, with the new cars with less ground effect and slightly smaller cars, downsized cars, well, there we should actually judge the technical staff recruited by Vasseur. So, to date, yes, there is still Vasseur's responsibility in Ferrari's poor performance. This is in doubt. However, we also have to wait, since it's next year, before making a general assessment of Ferrari's internal situation and therefore actually questioning Vasseur. Certainly, Ferrari has brought home two important podiums, those in Monaco and Barcelona, with the city car also helping the red in Spain. And it must be said that Ferrari is now facing a crisis. However, the drivers have strongly defended Vasseur during this period, which is not the best for the French team principal. We also need to discuss the Canada weekend, as Leclerc made a bold statement in the press conference. We remember last year where both Ferraris were out of Q3 and then there was a double retirement in the race. A very disappointing weekend in 2024, perhaps one of the most disappointing of last year and this year. Ferrari, however, is more optimistic, especially with Leclerc, who said in Monaco, "We have shown that the car is strong when it faces the curbs even higher, and therefore Canada, which in some ways reminds Monaco for the tight curves, for the higher curbs. Even though there are some high-speed sections, more RS zones, but it's not that dissimilar." Well, Leclerc said that in his opinion Ferrari could present itself as the second force not too far from McLaren, so there is hope. And even Hamilton himself, who was worried after the race in Spain, we heard him, he was very bitter about the result, but especially about the gap suffered from Leclerc. Well, in this case, he understood that there was a failure on his single-seater in Spain. That's why the performances were not optimal. And he shows up here in Canada more positive, more optimistic. He knows his goal is to adapt to the Rossa in his first Ferrari season, so he agreed. A perfect weekend would also help with the team's morale. But internally, there is no confusion. At Ferrari, we are working very well, even if from the outside it doesn't seem like this. And Hamilton remains calm despite being overtaken by Hülkenberg in Spain. He understood that in the second half of the race he had a technical problem with his single-seater, so now he is even more calm. From the post-race statements he made in Barcelona, he said that his goal is to return to the top with Ferrari. He does not want to give up on the project. In fact, there have been many rumors, in my opinion, also reckless and unfounded, about Hamilton saying, "Damn, he will leave Ferrari at the end of the season, given the negative results of the first part of the year." Well, in my opinion, no. And Hamilton himself has also denied it, saying that he wants to build a long-term project, so he's not here for flash results. Sure, having a good weekend helps to increase motivation and also boost the morale within the team, but currently he is working with the technicians to adapt as best as possible to the single-seater. After the sprint race won in Shanghai, China, the double disqualification suffered afterwards in the normal race, and then we remember the podium he made in the sprint race in Miami. There have been good results from Hamilton alternating with more negative results. However, to date, in my opinion, we should not consider the progress of Hamilton's season. We need to better understand when Hamilton will be able to take a stand and say, "Okay, I have found how to best adapt to Ferrari. From now on, we have taken an extra step to drive the car better. Because to date, Hamilton is not able to express his potential on the single-seater. And this is my opinion. Then I also want to know yours about the current situation of Hamilton. And he also took a stand, obviously, on Vasseur's situation. He said that, in his opinion, he is the right man to carry forward Ferrari. He mentioned a significant detail about the new 2026 project with updated rules. Without Vasseur, Hamilton would not have gone to Ferrari. Let's remember that Vasseur was the right man who convinced Hamilton to go to the Scuderia. It was him who made the call to Lewis and convinced him, so this is worth remembering. Moreover, many didn't even hope for Lewis's arrival at Ferrari because they said he is so tied to Mercedes that it's impossible for him to leave the Brackley team after 12 seasons with that team to go to Ferrari. But that's what happened. And I connect to a parenthesis about Leclerc, who has denied rumors about his future, but I still leave them open because it's normal that Charles denies rumors about his future. He's tied to Ferrari. He has a great love for the Rossa. We've said it many times since he was little. It's normal that expected results may not come after a few years. Leclerc has been at Ferrari for longer than Hamilton, so it's normal that he might think about going to another team, which could be Mercedes, Aston Martin. It will also depend a lot on the new 2026 rules, but I'll leave the door open on that because we've seen creative cases in the past. Hamilton going to Ferrari, or in MotoGP, Marquez moving to Ducati, those kinds of moves. Such a thing seemed impossible. Marquez was so tied to Honda that it was impossible to see him in Ducati, but that's what happened. Well, the same thing could still happen to Leclerc, so I leave that door open anyway. But it's normal that Leclerc has denied it, to try to calm the situation and, let's say, give stability to the team. And if we said that Montreal could be a favorable track for the Reds, given the situation in Monaco, but be careful with 3 points that we should evaluate later during the free trials. The first one is traction. So McLaren is definitely stronger than Ferrari in traction, and also stronger, in my opinion, than Red Bull and Mercedes. So, on this point, Ferrari struggles a bit more on the exit of the curve, especially from the slow curves. So be careful after the first chicane, for example, or at the exit of the hairpin in Canada. So those curves there could be a bit more challenging. Ferrari secured second place. The changes in direction are always underestimated in Canada, but there are many changes in direction in the central part of the circuit. And there you need to be very precise and have a good lateral grip then. So pay attention to this point where you will need to find the right balance in the car's setup. And third point, obviously, pay attention to the hybrid part. We've said it many times. The hybrid part will mainly affect the third sector. So in the stretches, in the straights, and in the race management. Another point I feel I can add is also the management of the tire. 6 in qualifying G, Ferrari struggles with the thermal management of the tire. Not so much in degradation, but more precisely in different temperatures between the front and rear of the tires. So you have to be careful to manage such a soft tire as the C6 and to calibrate it well, sector by sector, trying not to use it too much in one sector, that then you lose too much in another. Be cautious with these crucial points in Canada for Ferrari. However, there is a positive aspect that assists Ferrari. Surely there are many bumps and dips, and Ferrari, as we have also seen in Monaco, manages to handle the track disconnections very well. Red Bull is the most disadvantaged, if you will, among the top teams at this moment. However, one aspect that could help it is the fact that the weather conditions are milder compared to other Grand Prix, such as Barcelona, for example. And so, Red Bull could take advantage of this, especially in tire management, a factor when there are weather conditions, when there are higher temperatures. Red Bull struggles a lot on this point. On the other hand, of course, McLaren remains the favorite among the top teams. It is the #1 candidate to take pole position and the victory. However, as there aren't many fast corners, but more supportive curves, changes of direction, the advantage could also be somewhat limited, as we saw in Monaco. So I expect a fairly similar situation. The TD018 performed better in Barcelona with fewer aggressive brakes due to long bends. In contrast, Montreal has more braking and accelerating. There is a variation of the incidence of the higher wing, so the TD018 will be more noticeable on this track compared to Barcelona, which is certainly a more complete track from a technical point of view, but with fewer brakes, fewer decelerations, fewer accelerations, and therefore there is a variation of this smaller wing. However, there is also to add a point that McLaren prepared for the TD018 before the others, being the most advantaged team this season. It also had time to experiment with the new front front wing already from Imola. That's why they arrived in Barcelona more prepared than other teams like Ferrari, which introduced the new wing in the last race. Very last. What did we say? That the curbs and bumps are still a weak point for Red Bull, so we expect them to be less strong compared to other tracks. And I really like the statements made by Max. In fact, in the press conference, he said, if I'm disqualified, it will be a problem for Formula 1. I won't change my way of racing. So he will remain aggressive even here in Canada, and he doesn't feel he is directly fighting for the World Championship. Does he think McLaren is favored both in the Constructors' Championship, but especially also in the Drivers' Championship? And Max also added, well, yes, he made a misjudgment in Barcelona. He also admitted it on his social channels. However, it was a sum of unpleasant situations that, let's say, added up one after the other. And this compromised Max's race, leading him to the mistake with the contact with Russell. It should also be said that the hard tyre mounted on Max's Red Bull RB21 did not help. It had no performance. It couldn't go fast in the curve. It didn't have the same level of grip it had before with the previous tyre, so this certainly didn't help him. However, we know that Max can lose his patience very easily and can also become dangerous on the track when these situations arise. So it will be interesting to see how he will behave in Canada, whether he will continue to race as always, which I expect, or if he will change something, the team will still pressure him. A disqualification is painful, especially in the Constructors' Championship, where Red Bull battles Mercedes and Ferrari. But we'll see how it goes. Let me know in the comments what you expect for this weekend in Canada. What are the values on the field of the top teams? Let me know your thoughts on the statements made to Leclerc and Hamilton, on Vasseur, and also on their future. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on this channel. I sincerely thank you for all the support. I obviously remind you that during race weekends we comment on each session together. Here from Rastrodutto, we'll see you in the next video.